On Christmas Eve, the sky over Chicago hung low and heavy, as if carrying the weight of every lonely heart in the city. In the middle of Grant Park, surrounded by glittering decorations, ringing bells, and the warm laughter of families passing by, a man in an expensive gray suit sat alone on a frost-covered bench. His name was Jonathan Pierce, a well-known CEO who once stood at the top of everything: success, money, reputation. Yet at that moment, he looked like a man who had lost the very meaning of life. His eyes were swollen, his hands trembled slightly, and the cold air around him seemed warmer than the silence he carried in his chest. People walked past him without noticing that his entire world had quietly collapsed. And then, like a spark in the darkness, a tiny voice broke through the stillness of that night. "Don't cry, mister. You can borrow my mom. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the miracles that ordinary people can bring into a broken life, please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It helps more stories of hope reach others who might need them." Jonathan hadn't meant to end up on that bench. He had stormed out of his office hours earlier, shaken by a phone call that shattered him. His father, the last family he had passed away unexpectedly that afternoon. Jonathan had no spouse, no children, no siblings, no one waiting at home. He had spent years choosing boardrooms over birthdays, emails over dinner tables, and success over connection. And now, when tragedy struck, he had no arms to fall into, no voice to say, "You're not alone." He had driven aimlessly until the city lights blurred through his tears, eventually ending up at that park where people celebrated the warmth he no longer felt. While he sat drowning in memories and regret, he suddenly sensed movement near his feet. A little boy, no more than 6, with messy blonde hair peeking from under a wool beanie, stood holding a small toy truck with chipped paint. His jacket was slightly too big, his scarf crooked, and his boots had the wear of a family who stretched every dollar. Yet his eyes, bright, innocent, and unafraid, held a kind of courage adults had forgotten how to carry. Jonathan blinked, confused, unsure if the boy was even talking to him. But before he could say anything, the child hopped up onto the bench beside him, swinging his legs and offering a shy smile. The little boy's name was Mason, and he seemed completely unaware of how unusual it was for a child to approach a stranger. He quietly reached out and held Jonathan's sleeve, as if trying to anchor him back to the world. Jonathan wanted to speak, but all that came out was a broken breath, the kind that carried too much pain and not enough strength. He bowed his head, covering his eyes with a trembling hand, and for the first time in years he allowed himself to cry without caring who saw him. Mason watched him for a moment, then glanced over his shoulder toward a small woman arranging paper bags of donated treats under a Christmas tree set up by volunteers. She looked in her mid-30s, with auburn hair pulled into a messy bun and a warm face touched by exhaustion but softened with kindness. Her name was Natalie, and she worked 2 jobs while trying to raise her son alone after her husband left years ago. Mason pointed at her with all the certainty in the world and repeated his words, slower this time, as if speaking a sacred truth. "You can borrow my mom. She helps everyone." Jonathan's tears froze mid-fall as he followed the boy's small finger toward the woman. Something about the scene, the simplicity, the sincerity, dragged him out of the darkness long enough to breathe. Mason tugged at his hand again, guiding him gently but confidently across the snowy grass. Jonathan allowed it. He didn't know why. Perhaps because, for the first time in months, someone had reached for him. Natalie looked up when she heard footsteps crunching behind her. Her expression shifted from curiosity to concern the moment she saw Jonathan's swollen eyes. Without hesitation, she placed a bag of cookies aside and came closer. She didn't ask who he was or why he was hurting. She simply wrapped a soft blanket around his shoulders, as if she had known him for years. The smallest kindness from a stranger pierced through his grief in a way nothing else had. He tried to explain between uneven breaths. He told her about losing his father, the regrets he carried like chains, the years he wasted choosing work over life. Natalie listened quietly, her presence gentle and steady. She didn't judge him for his choices or his success. She didn't offer hollow reassurances. She simply let him speak, let him grieve, and stood beside him like an anchor in a storm. Families continued gathering around the Christmas tree, offering donations, sharing food, and laughing together. The warmth of the community felt like a world Jonathan had forgotten existed. Mason soon dragged him into helping pass out small gift bags, and though Jonathan's hands still shook, they were no longer trembling from sorrow alone. They trembled from the unfamiliar feeling of being included. When Mason slipped his small gloved hand into Jonathan's palm, Jonathan felt something inside him crack open in a way that felt strangely healing. As hours passed, he found himself smiling at times, something he didn't think he would do again that day. Natalie offered him hot cocoa, and as they stood near the glowing Christmas lights, she gently told him, "You didn't lose everything today. There are still people meant to cross your path." Her words settled into his heart like snowflakes melting into warmth. The night grew colder, but the park remained alive with music, lights, and small acts of generosity. Jonathan realized he didn't feel quite as hollow anymore. That terrified him and comforted him at the same time. Before leaving, Mason insisted Jonathan join them for Christmas dinner at their small apartment. There was no hesitation, no politeness, just pure, eager innocence. Jonathan accepted, feeling as though he was being offered something he had long been denied, a place to belong, even if just for a moment. Their apartment was small but filled with warmth, hand-drawn pictures on the fridge, a tiny artificial tree decorated with mismatched ornaments, and the smell of roasted chicken filling the air. Sitting at their table, Jonathan felt emotion rising again. But this time it wasn't loneliness. It was gratitude. It was hope. He thought of his father, of missed chances, of all the years he spent chasing the wrong kind of success. And he knew, deep down, that the life he wanted to live would begin from this very night. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. It truly helps keep stories of hope alive. Before we end, please comment below. Kindness creates miracles. Jonathan left their home with a full stomach, a warmer heart, and the first real sense of purpose he had felt in years. He wasn't just a CEO anymore. He was a man who had been given another chance, by a little boy who noticed his tears, and by a mother who offered compassion without hesitation. And from that Christmas Eve onward, Jonathan promised himself he would live differently. He would be present, he would be kind, and he would never again overlook the power of one simple act of humanity.